Welcome to Parenting Teens with Dr. Cam, the podcast dedicated to helping you tackle the challenges of parenting teenagers without the drama. I'm your host, Dr. Cam. Let's get on with the show.
Do you ever feel you're raising totally different kids under the same roof? Your firstborn follows the rules, your middle child is the peacemaker, and your youngest, a total wild card. Turns out it's not just their personality, it's birth order at work. So, if sibling battles, guilt, or parenting inconsistencies ever have made you question yourself, this episode is for you. Today I'm talking to Dr. Kelly Jameson, a therapist and speaker who specializes in how birth order shapes your kids and your parenting. But before we dive into why you might be harder on your firstborn, why your youngest seems to get away with everything, and how to make things feel fair even when it seems impossible, I want to ask you to do a quick favor for me. Please take a moment right now to hit subscribe, rate the show, and leave a review. Your support helps other parents just like you find this podcast and get the guidance that they're searching for. And it makes sure you never miss an episode. So now let's jump into today's topic. Hello, Kelly. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay. So birth order. Why birth order? What has sparked your interest in that?
Well, it's kind of split in the field of psychology. A lot of people think it's not really an issue, and some people really believe in it. I happen to be in the camp that really believes in it because I see it in my patients. I live it in my own family. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. So basically every step of the way for me, I find it to be really accurate in terms of how these kids often behave in the world.
Yeah. So you are taking a deeper look and now helping us understand. I'm the oldest, so okay. I know, and there's 2 of us. I have a single daughter, so, an only child. So I do see a lot of differences. What do you think as parents? Because I know I talk to parents all the time, and they're like, the first one, we had it figured out. And now the second one, nothing we did is working. And it is usual that the first one is more the rule follower. Why?
That's correct. The first one is generally more of the rule follower because the people modeling life for them are adults. So they're observing mom and dad being organized and efficient and kind and sensible and, following the rules as adults do. So therefore, the firstborn is watching mom and dad to understand how they sort of ought to be in the world. So they have a pretty sort of grown-up models that they try to emulate. Mm-hmm. Child number 2 or 3 or 4 in front of mom and dad or between mom and dad are other kids, and they're not doing things efficiently or organized. It's a little bit more of a messier model. So number 2 and number 3 generally aren't as neat and organized as the firstborn because they're seeing adults and children do life. So they're getting a little bit more of a varied experience.
I think it's true, though, too. I think the older child, from my experience, my own personal experience, too, but all the kids that I talk to, the older child very much gets frustrated and annoyed, particularly with the next child. And they're like, leave me alone. And the sibling, usually looks up and admires this person. Tell us about that dynamic and just to understand it. And also as parents, how do we navigate that? Because a lot of times the older kid is not very nice to the younger kid, which I was guilty of myself.
Right. And, that definitely plays out with siblings too, but also that firstborn can often have social difficulties for the same reasons. So, they kind of look down at their little siblings and get annoyed. They also kind of side-eye their friends and also get annoyed because when you're a firstborn and you're more type A perfectionistic, you're sort of judging others around you, whether that be your siblings or your friends, because a firstborn is looking at a younger sibling going like, why can't you get it together? Like, why can't you find your shoes? Why can't you get in the car on time? In a peer group, they're also being like, that science homework was not that hard. Like, why are you just now waiting to do this? Why are you stressing out about something you should have done last night? So we see that dynamic play out because they just feel so competent in the world that when they're surrounded by non-firstborns or non-only children, they can get irritated and frustrated. So it also plays out with their friends too, but definitely siblings. Now, the second part of your question is siblings sort of idolize their older firstborns. Yes, because they look like everything is easy for them.
Right.
It just looks smooth. It looks like they always know where their things are. They always know what to expect. They're never surprised. Yes, they're stressed often, but they are never surprised and they're never disoriented. And to a younger child, that looks pretty cool.
That's interesting to hear that too, because I guess looking back, that is kind of true, right? And you do have this like person close to you to look up to and model. My sister turned out pretty cool, so I feel like I must have done a good job modeling. I'm going to take credit for her. No,
good job.
So one of the things that I hear a lot, and I think this could be with birth order too, is there is a lot of sibling rivalry. And I feel like it's almost impossible to avoid sibling rivalry and fighting. Can you explain that dynamic a little bit first on what's going on? Why can't our kids just get along? And then I want to get into what do parents do about it? Because they're lost.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, it's sort of basic theory about why there's such sibling rivalry is because each child has to behave differently to gain the number one resource in a family, which is parental attention. And there's limited supply of parental resources. Therefore, each child has to act out differently to gain attention. Now, one would think, okay, so if siblings are watching the firstborn get parental attention in that way, we should emulate that child. But that is actually not how this works. It's called branching off theory, in that each child has to behave and interact differently with their parents to get the perceived resources, which is parental attention. So if you have a firstborn who's generally organized and efficient and neat and gets a lot of positive reward from parents for doing things well, the second child is not going to behave that way due to what is branching off theory. They're going to be the opposite, which is why everyone laughs, because the second child is often known to be a complete 180 from the firstborn. And that is actually accurate and correct, because that child has to be different to garner those parental resources. And then each child, again, has to sort of behave different. They might have shades that match, but for the most part, science tells us they have to do that to get that parental attention. So second part, how to parent this is you really have to focus on one-on-one time with each child, which is going to be different the more children you have. But that rivalry will sort of dissipate if they believe that they can garner mom and dad's attention by just being who they are. And the best way to do that is in uninterrupted one-on-one time with mom or dad. So that means, you always go grocery shopping with mom, or you do Saturday morning breakfast with dad, or these little rituals that parents can do with their kids so that kids don't need to act out against their siblings for parental attention, because they know they will be getting the attention regardless of the behavior between the siblings.
Yeah, I think that is so important, because another thing to really look at that I see frequently is this idea of fairness. And nobody thinks that the fairness rules in their favor. Nobody, not one of the kids. There's not one kid that goes, I get the favor. They all feel like the other sibling gets treated better.
That's right.
How do we address this unfairness? Because parents, I know my parents went down to the cent when it came to like Christmas and buying stuff, so that there was no argument. But even when we do that, there's still a sense of fairness. And that creates this resentment too.
Yes, and that ledger runs throughout adulthood. I have people in therapy who compare how much their parents paid on their weddings, how much they paid for their colleges, their cars, how much they're helping them with childcare as grandparents. This does not stop once they're out of the house. This literally goes on forever and ever. Amen. There's not much parents can do once they're out of the house. The best thing you can do is you have to explain ad nauseum why someone's getting something the other one hasn't. And most of the time it's based on the developmental stage of the child, right? So yes, he's allowed to stay up longer because he's in 8th grade and you're in 5th grade. And when he was in 5th grade, he was not allowed to stay up till 9:30 or whatever the marker is. So you have to constantly explain the reasons why. But oftentimes it's just based on age, and a child cannot argue age or developmental stage because those are facts. So you just have to explain, because if you say to a kid, well, it all comes out in the wash, it all, they don't like that answer, but they want to know that, okay, so in 8th grade, I'm allowed to stay up, and my brother was not allowed to stay up till 10 o'clock in 5th grade like I was. It's a lot of explanation, which is my advice in a lot of areas with parenting. Like, we assume that these kids understand why we do things. And, even all the way up through high school, they don't necessarily understand everything. So we have to continuously explain everything we're doing. We cannot assume they understand even when they're 17, 18 years old, because that is just not accurate.
No. And when we don't understand, we go to the worst possible explanation, which is they like them more than me, which I think is the other thing I always hear. And my sister and I laughed about this too. As we're older, we both go, you were the favorite kid. To this day, we're like, no, you were the favorite kid.
Yes, for sure.
And so everyone thinks that the other one is the favorite.
That's correct. Yes. And, my kids do the same thing, and they're like, who's your favorite child? And I always say Biscuit, which is my dog.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, he's always happy to see me. He never talks back. But you're right. They all think the other one is the favorite child. Of course, right now, they all think my youngest, who's my 6th grader, is the favorite. But he still needs a lot of help with school. I can't help with physics and pre-cal. I just can't. But I can help with states and capitals and the Civil War. So again, it's just explaining to them, I also sat with you in 6th grade and helped you study your states and capitals. I can't help you with your pre-cal. Right. So again, it's just explaining to them, because they always think the baby generally is the favorite.
Right, because you're getting all the attention, and you're usually the cutest at that point. You've grown out of your cute phase, and now this one's cuter.
Yes, so this one hasn't hit puberty yet, and he's not talking back, and he still likes me. So
still hugs me. So yeah, I like this one better right now.
Yeah, he's a little ahead right now. I'm not going to lie.
Right. I think one of the biggest challenges I see too, though, is parents seeing their kids fighting, and they'll see them arguing. They'll see, especially if the older one is mean to the younger one, it tends to be. And I always, I think whatever you were growing up, you probably relate to more when you're seeing the kids, because you understand more of that. So how do parents intercede? And do you do this with the birth order? How do they intercede when they see their kids fighting a lot?
Right. So let's just go one by one. So with the firstborn, they're generally going to jump in and try to co-parent with you. Mm. Because they have opinions and they have thoughts on what ought to be for their siblings. So they will chime in. So you have to sort of get in front of that and say, thank you, I will parent this scenario, but thank you for your advice.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting in the middle of these things, my line, because you often hear parents say, unless someone's bleeding, don't come and talk to me, or, boys will be boys, or let them play it out themselves. So I agree with that to an extent, mm-hmm. but there's a line where I believe is not okay. So normal sibling, banter is fine, but in arguing and, teasing and yelling. But when the teasing crosses into something that is completely out of their control, that is when I generally intervene, or I suggest parents intervene. So if you're just, giving each other a hard time for, swimming in the pool and somebody couldn't do the game or whatever, that's fine. But when the teasing starts to blend into things that are out of their control, so their body, the size of things, learning differences, stuttering, speech impediments, wearing glasses, wearing braces, weight, anything like that is out of a child's control, that's where I draw the line. And that becomes hurtful. Mm-hmm. But if you're just messing around about, the bathroom or the basketball game or something, I'm okay with that. But when it crosses the line into fixed traits or things that a child cannot control, that's when parents should intervene and sort of cut that out.
That is a very great distinction to make. And I think it's very concrete distinction for parents to make. Like, this is when, now, if we need to intervene, how do we do that in a way? Because again, this is what I see a lot is often it's the older one, not always, the older one picking on the younger one. So I see the parent going and defending the younger one, which creates a lot more resentment and anger of the older one because they're like, you're not getting my perspective.
Right.
So how do we intercede without creating more resentment between the kids, which is where this is probably coming from to begin with?
Right. Well, you should never approach it in front of all the kids at one time. So best thing to do is separate them and then go into their rooms, or one go outside, one go inside, and wait till everyone's not dysregulated anymore. So let everybody calm down for a minute. And then as a parent, you go in there and say, here's the deal. Like, I understand you think it was funny, but we're not making fun of his learning differences. That is non-negotiable. I have zero tolerance for that, and we're not going to do that. So that is a hard no in this house. And then if he or she says, well, they were making fun of me about such and such, okay? And then you talk through and you're like, he cannot control the fact that he has learning differences, okay? You can control the fact that he was making fun of your lunch being all over the counter or something. And again, it's just explaining where the line is, because kids don't know where the line is. So that it's our job to teach them the parameters of everything. And that even goes into teasing and arguing. Then you go into the other child's room, maybe the one that's upset, maybe the one that was being made fun of for a fixed trait or something that they cannot change. Then you go into that room and you say, I'm so sorry. She shouldn't have said that. I've had a talk with her about that, but just so you know, in this house, we are not going after people for things that they cannot fix or control. So both sides got the same message. They were packaged a little differently, but we reiterated what the rule or sort of the value is inside of our house.
Yeah, that so many pieces to that. I just want to reiterate. First is you separate them. You're not talking in front of them. So you're not defending one in front of the other, which just pits it. You're having the same message, but you have very clear boundaries and very clear like morals and values that you're sticking to, where you're communicating that. So your kids are learning where that line is, which is really important because they don't automatically know.
Right. Yes.
I love it. Okay.
And you let everybody calm down for a second.
Well, always, including yourself.
Please
calm down first before, I know, we're adjusting. What if we see this consistently? You've stopped and talked to them and you've mentioned this and they still continue because there's such, and I've seen this with some kids where the older kid particularly is embarrassed by the younger kid. Maybe the younger kid, because as teens, we feel like everyone kind of represent us. So we see something in our younger sibling that might feel embarrassing to us. And we are now kind of trying to separate ourselves. How do we address that?
Right. If it's your older one, and depending if they can handle a conversation like this, I mean, I think you go in and you say, listen, we need to talk about, your little brother, and say, you are obviously embarrassed by him. And if he's like, I'm not embarrassed, the parent says, it looks like you're embarrassed to be seen with him or to be around him. And we need to talk about this because I can't get rid of your little brother. Like, he's going to be with us at church. He's going to be with us at your games. So we need to figure out a way to work around this. So I need to know exactly what's going on with you so I can help you figure it out. Now, if it's the older child, I'm a big proponent of employing the oldest as much as they can handle for younger siblings who are having a hard time. So if they can handle it, if you have sort of a mature, responsible firstborn, and there's something going on with the younger child, I'm a big proponent of going in again. And a lot of this is just like one-on-one conversations in their room and saying, here's the deal. Your little brother's having a hard time with X. This is how Dad and I are working on it. This is what we're doing. Do you think that you could X? Now we've employed him, and instead of being against the little brother, now he's on the team to sort of help little brother. And to a firstborn, They love that. Now, some would argue, well, you're parentifying the child. I'm not parentifying the child in that regard. I'm giving him or her a new role of support. And firstborns love this. Actually, any child that you employ to sort of get in on team mom and dad to help a sibling,
love it.
They feel very grown up. They feel very responsible. They're getting a lot of they feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
So anytime you can do that is great. But it just is a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Side conversation in a mature fashion to explain to the child, this is what I'm saying. I think you might be embarrassed of him or her. I need to know exactly where this is coming from so I can help you fix it because they're coming along. And then secondarily, they're embarrassing you or they're doing this because they're having a hard time with this. And frankly, like, I could use your help, and see if that doesn't diffuse some of that like negative energy around that sibling.
Yeah, I think that is extremely powerful, because one thing that I hear from the oldest, and again, I was the oldest, is there's this feeling that you're the first one. You have to fight to be seen as the eldest,
Yes.
and to get any privileges. You get all the responsibility and none of the privileges as the older. And you see the younger ones coming up, getting privileges you would fight tooth and nail for, and you get upset too. So I think by employing them and saying, I value you as the oldest,
Right.
I see your wisdom, I see what you've learned, and you can help, that resonates very deeply with them, because they do want to be seen and recognized as, I am the oldest.
Yes, exactly.
For that.
Yes.
I broke the parents in for you. I should get something, right?
Yes. And the fine line there is to make sure that child can handle it.
Yes. Okay.
Right? So maybe the third one's having a hard time, and you try that with the second one. And then he or she, while let's say she's dysregulated, says to the little one, well, mom and dad told me that, you don't have any friends and I'm supposed to be your friend. Like, that's now you've just torpedoed the entire mission.
Yeah.
So before you employ that sibling, make 100% sure that they can handle the mission and that they're not going to get dysregulated and blow the cover of the whole thing.
Yeah. I think the other key thing to distinguish is this is your teen agreeing to do it, not you forcing them to do it, the eldest. Because when you're like, you have to do this, or you have to take your sister with you everywhere you go, or you have to include her in all of the stuff that you do with your friends, that is not building relationship, that's building resentment. Do you agree?
Totally. Love that. Yes. Yes.
How do we handle it when the younger sibling constantly wants to be around the older sibling, is always bothering them, is always like wants to be around them and their friends? And how do we help our eldest in that without making our youngest feel like they're not loved?
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. You have to identify the personality of the youngest. Are they just super extroverted and they can hang with the older kids? So they're challenged or stimulated by doing that, so they want to do it? Or is it truly they're enamored by their older sibling and they just want to do what they're doing? So you kind of got to get to the core of what is really the need there for the little one to be with the older child. Like, are they just wanting to perform? Are they if it's the last born, they're generally outgoing. So there's something to that. But if it is truly about just being in adoration of the older sibling, then it's important to carve out time for those two siblings to do something special that's just theirs, so that the little one doesn't encroach on the social events of the older one, that they have their own thing that they always do. So I'm a big proponent, as you can probably tell, of like family rituals of, we always do this and we always do that. And sometimes that means, the older sibling takes the little one for ice cream every Sunday night after dinner or something. And these little rituals, they take away the expectation of these sort of ancillary events on the side that the little one wants to tag onto. You can remind him, remember, like, you're going with Sam on Sunday to get your ice cream, but this is Sam's time with his friends right now. And you just explain to them that boundary and the expectations so that they have something to look forward to with their brother.
I love that. That's really powerful. And it's recognizing that separately and recognizing why they need it, so that the older is understanding that too. And I think having that relationship with their younger one is wonderful. And that gets me to another question. What if your kids don't like each other and they're just not nice to each other. They don't like each other. And all you want is for a happy family and for them to be friends.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, that's tough. I'm not going to lie. That's a tough one. I think instead of, all these other examples I've said kind of one off each other in the bedrooms and have these conversations about what's what and the boundaries. But if you truly have siblings that don't enjoy each other, now we're labeling everything as family. This is our family dinner. This is our family road trip. This is our family vacation. This is our family breakfast, meaning they don't have a choice. And then you're coaching the team instead of coaching the player. So now you're just reiterating values about, in our family, we always do this together. And in our family, we make a point to do this together. And now it's a collective rather than an individual. And you're just going to have to ride that until these two get past whatever developmental stage they're in.
Yeah.
And to the point that they can at least appreciate each other.
Yeah, that's a big one. You can't force them right now to change their mind and like them, but you can force them to learn to tolerate one another. And,
to value family.
Yeah, and value family is key because I think one of the key things we want, and do you see even kids that don't get along as family? What can parents do? And I think that's one of them. But are there other things parents can do to help really nurture a relationship that may not be great right now, but can continue and can become something great moving on? Because I see some siblings that are, into adulthood, and that's my sister and I are best friends now. We fought a lot. I wasn't the nicest oldest sister. I would pick on her a lot. But now we are best friends, right? And so how do we nurture that? Because I also see siblings that will never talk to each other again, ever.
Yeah. Yes. So when they're under your roof and you still have some sort of, control over what's what, not forcing them, but exposure to all of their activities and interests. So, for example, my daughter was into theater for a long time, so I would bring my two boys to her shows. Did you think they wanted to be at, Aladdin the musical? No, they did not. No. But they were there and they were exposed to theater and they got to see their sister in a way that they would have never seen before. She's also been to 8,000 lacrosse games for those boys too. And she sees them doing their thing and what they love to do. So even if it's not, you don't have to debrief or hash out, you don't have to force them to appreciate it. But if you just expose them to what their siblings' life looks like, and you don't have to say anything, just straight exposure, they start to see their siblings outside of the home, outside of the annoying sister, outside of the annoying brother, and they see them on a field or on a stage and they think, that's pretty cool. Or she's pretty good at that. Or, he's a pretty good leader on that team. I would have never expected that. And it's not anything you have to verbally analyze, but it's just exposure to seeing their siblings in their flow and having siblings have the aha moment of, oh, my brother's actually respected in parts of his life. And they think he's pretty great. Or, man, she's pretty good at this. I just thought she was my annoying little sister. So I think looking for those touch points, and I know that's hard to do logistically when you have multiple children and everyone's spread out, but the more you can expose them to what the other ones are good at, it sort of, deposits some credit into their cool column, and they start to see these siblings of theirs as important people out in the world and not just annoying people that they have to share a family and a home with.
Yeah, that's great. So there's so many things where parents just need to be very aware that, first of all, these kids literally are scrambling for a limited resource. So the more somebody else gets, the less that's available for them. So they are automatically pitted against each other. Like they're competitors from day one. So I think we have to first understand that and notice if they are starting to go head to head, there's an imbalance somewhere. Even if there's not an imbalance from your perspective, they're feeling an imbalance. right?
Precisely. And it's worse with twins, obviously,
Oh,
because
I've
they're
seen,
the
yeah, twins, especially at teens, they just are like, I need to be separate from you and have my own identity. It can get ugly.
Yeah, because they're the parental resource that they're vying for. They're at the exact same stage and they need the same thing generally.
Yeah.
It's not like siblings who are a couple years apart and they sort of need different things. With twins, they need the exact same thing at the exact same time. So all of a sudden that resource becomes even smaller. So
Yeah.
that one's really tough too.
Yeah. So noticing this and then making changes based on whomever, like if somebody's really angry at one sibling, is that a sign that that kid actually probably needs more time?
Could be. I mean, the research says, and honestly, this is one of my, everyone loves this post when I post it. It's specifically speaking, boys that are within 2 years of each other is the most conflictual sibling dynamic. Not girls, but boys within 2 years of each other have the biggest conflict out of any sibling dynamic because 2 years is not enough time for the two boys to establish hierarchy. So their sizes are similar, their skill levels similar, their abilities might be similar. So they tend to work out this indifference through conflict. Outside of a 2-year window with boys specifically, it starts to become clear that he's older, he's bigger, he's smarter, he's more capable. So they don't need to sort of fight it out as much. But boys within 2 years is the most conflictual dyad in the parenting realm.
So all those people with those boys are going, I know, I hear you.
Yes. So there's some things that, regardless of what your parenting style is or how you're managing these children, there's just some factors at play here that are going to be tough, regardless of how you're coming at it with your parenting.
So I want to ask you one more thing before we go. When it comes to the parenting, are there adjustments we can make or things to just be aware of with each child based on their birth order that we can adapt in order to make that a little bit more seamless or a little bit less conflictual, since we know, okay, the oldest, typically this is what happens or what they need. The younger one, what do we need to think of?
Yeah. So with only children and firstborns, we want to, as parents, we want to model spontaneity. We want to model and talk through mistakes we made during the day, things that we forgot, so that they understand that adults mess up too, and they forget things, and they have bad days. And so we need to model that. This sounds backwards, but you don't really want to highlight a ton of firstborn or only child's achievements because it can feed the beast. So we have to remember that like a perfectionistic firstborn or only child, they have an internal motor that they're just cranking out achievements and work for themselves on the inside. It honestly doesn't matter how you're parenting that child. So there's no need to elevate their achievements because that's not necessarily what they're doing it for. They don't need that spelling test on the refrigerator. They're doing it for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's almost backwards parenting, but you don't want to elevate that because it feeds a beast that's unsustainable, and that can get ugly really fast the older that those kids get.
Yeah.
For middle children, they often find value outside of your home. So the middle child is going to want to sleep over at a friend's more. They're not going to want to have friends over to the house. And don't take it personally. When a middle child goes to another friend's house, they feel special and they feel valued, and they don't necessarily feel that way in their homes. So they prefer that. They're great at making friends. They're all the sort of typical middle-born, things that we know. But parenting-wise, don't take it personally if they prefer other people's homes or cars to go places with groups. Number 2, parenting a middle child, you always want to ask them their opinion on things. If there's, if the family's struggling on where to go on vacation or where to go to dinner or what should we do about this, spend some time with the middle child going through that, because the middle child is very thorough. They're very diplomatic. They're good at understanding both sides of an argument. And they often have really good problem-solving solution skills that if we remember to tap into, we can be very surprised by what a middle child will come up with. The last born's lot in life is to be taken seriously. So because they're so cute and they're the smallest and the littlest and they're the most charming and generally speaking the most outgoing and the funniest, they often feel like no one takes them seriously. So parenting that child means really getting to their level, not looking at them like they're just the cutest thing ever, but really asking them what's going on in that brain of theirs and how they're thinking about things, and talking about their goals and things that they want to accomplish and taking them seriously, and valuing that side of them, not just their charming, cute, whimsical side of things.
That is gold, all of those. That is really important and very different approaches that we do need to take. So I love that. Thank you. What have I not asked that parents need to know? Anything we've missed?
I think it's important to talk through how the last born ends up being the most charismatic. When we're talking about that parental resource, like I said, the firstborn models the parents. The secondborn is generally the opposite of the firstborn. And then you might have, child number 2, 3, 4, however many kids. But the lastborn is generally the most outgoing because it's the hardest role to fill. Because it takes the most vulnerability to be funny and on display and charismatic and the comic relief of the family. So by the time the lastborn comes through, the perfectionistic role is taken, the rebel pushing the envelope role is taken, and frankly, none of those look very fun to a lastborn. Like, that one looks stressful. That one looks like it has a lot of consequences. I'm not trying to do that. So what's left for them is to be the funny one and to be the most charismatic. A firstborn is not going to do that. A middle child is probably going to roll their eyes at that, but a lastborn is like, yes, I will do that, because it takes the most vulnerability to go out there and be funny and be the center of attention. But they catch on very early that they get their parental needs met, and then they also get a lot of positive reward inside their family. That firstborn who's working very hard likes a little comic relief now and then. So when the lastborn does something silly or funny and everyone laughs, they think, okay, that's my role. That's what I'm going to do. So that's generally why you get the lastborn that's so funny, is because it's the last role to be taken. And frankly, it requires the most vulnerability and nobody else wants it.
Right. I think it is interesting, though, that it is about roles, and it kind of is that hierarchy of what roles do you take. And it's not, I'm guessing it's not always in that order, but it's most likely in that order.
Yeah. And if there's more than 5 years between children, birth order resets. So you can have a firstborn who's very perfectionistic, and then 5 or 6 years later have another child. That child is also perfectionistic too. So there's a few sort of rules with birth order that can throw some things off. But I'm often asked about blended families. Children come into blended families with their birth order, so that doesn't change. The dynamic of that doesn't change based on blended families. But if there's obviously autism or things like that, or chronic illness or something, that can affect birth order characteristics. But for families that are, pretty much lock and step, these are general themes that we see. And whenever I give this presentation in person, inevitably someone will be like, well, that's not my family. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not all, but it's more than enough that we can call it accurate.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't ring true in your family, it just simply makes it anecdotal, but it doesn't say that birth order is
right. It doesn't refute the whole
correct.
thing. Right. And I think what's interesting too is that this also, we already know comparing kids is not a healthy thing to do, but here, this makes it even more clear why that is not effective, because you're comparing two very different people with different roles. So saying, why aren't you more like your older sibling?
Right.
Is not helpful.
Right. Yeah. Because their motivations are entirely different.
Yeah. They're trying not to be.
Right.
That's why they're not. Right.
Exactly.
But thank you. Yes. I don't want to be that way. So don't make me that way.
Exactly.
What is, when parents walk away from this, what is just one key takeaway that you would like them to walk away with, if there's just one thing?
Regarding birth order or parenting in general?
Birth order.
Birth order. Is that each of your children have different motivations. Take a little time to figure out what each one of those are and parent accordingly.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. I really, really enjoy it, Kelly. This has been very helpful.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing.
And that's a wrap. Thank you, parents, for taking time out of your busy day to listen in. I appreciate you. If you found the episode enlightening, please like, review, and share with a friend navigating the teen years. Until next time, stay curious. Remember, there's always more to the story than what you see.